Chapter 386, A Stronger Hidden Expert. Once the three undead creatures agreed on Han Sha-O's participation, Han Sha-O immediately started communicating with the little skeleton. As the distance between them was becoming shorter, Han Sha-O could easily convey his thoughts to the little skeleton. The clever little skeleton, who was currently flying over at high speed on a bone demon, completely understood Han Sha-O's intention. When the three undead creatures saw that Han Sha-O had agreed, they did not try to retrieve the serene luster gem in the middle of the black spring. Instead, they spread out in front of the spring, ordering the surrounding low-ranked undead creatures to stop fighting and to slowly encircle this location. There were two evil knights in the surroundings who slowly headed towards the huge knight that brandished the 2-meter broadsword, while a few hate warriors stood separately in front of the apparition and the mummy lord. They thoroughly guarded this area, intending to make this place the resting grounds of the approaching little skeleton. A shrill whistle could be heard gradually coming closer. Under the dusky sky, a huge shadow slowly approached. The wings connected to the variant bone demon's rotting corpse were 5 to 6 meters in length when fully extended. In addition, its whole body was covered with fearsome bone spears. This caused the bone demon that could fly to have ample deterring strength. More than 10 sparkling white bones formed a cushion on the back of the flying bone demon. Seated on it was the little skeleton, who held a long sharp bone spear. Its purple demon eye was filled with a glistening radiance, while its small body gave off an imposing presence. The huge knight waved his rusted 2-meter long sword at the little skeleton, who was flying over on the bone demon, spreading out his indignant consciousness. This time you wouldn't be able to escape. You are currently no longer a match for me. If you submit to me, I will spare your life. When the little skeleton had arrived, he unyieldingly stayed in the air, looking down as he rode the bone demon, his dignified consciousness transmitted over. You can forget about that happening. I would rather let my soul be obliterated than to be your slave, the knight roared. He then gave a command to his subordinates: kill this wretched skeleton. As the knight shouted out his orders, the mummy lord and the apparition also ordered their subordinates to attack. Hundreds upon hundreds of undead creatures were like a locust swarm as they charged toward the little skeleton and his bone demon mound. Among them were gargoyles that could fly, which formed groups and attacked in waves and were the first to charge towards the little skeleton with no fear of death. Looking down on the various low-ranked undead creatures approaching the little skeleton's purple demon eye suddenly emitted purple light halos. They spread out like waves of running water from his purple demon eye, gradually covering the surrounding area around the little skeleton. The whole area was filled with a vicious, imposing aura. When the charging low-ranked undead creatures were hit by the waves of mysterious aura, they were all suddenly stunned, seemingly forgetting that they had to attack the little skeleton. Even the gargoyles that didn't fear death had bypassed the little skeleton and headed into the distance. You lowly, weak existences, step down. A harsh, dignified consciousness was suddenly transmitted from the little skeleton, extending out in all directions. All the low-ranked undead creatures that were enveloped by the purple light from the purple demon eye were caught in a daze. They hesitated for a moment, as though fearing the little skeleton's might, and actually disobeyed the suicidal orders from the knight and the mummy lord, all of them voluntarily opening up the path. Only the two evil knights appeared to have barely resisted the corrosion of the purple demon eye's bright light on their consciousness. After being dazed for a long while, they actually charged toward the little skeleton again. Along the way, the two evil knights conveniently grabbed a few skeleton warriors by their sides, dismantling the skeleton warriors' bones, and shot them toward the little skeleton in the sky. Bang bang bang. Without even waiting for the bone spears to close in, the little skeleton swept with the long bone spear in his hand. An earth-shattering death chi emerged violently, causing all the bone spears shooting toward him to explode. The little skeleton did not seem to put the two evil knights in his eyes, still looking into the distance at the three undead creatures as well as Han Sha-O. He transmitted another message through his consciousness: since you don't acknowledge your allegiance, the only alternative is death. The bone demon beneath him suddenly flew forward, heading for the 5-meter tall knight. The little skeleton tightly grasped his 3-meter long bone spear. An enormous amount of death chi that carried dense killing intent assaulted the 4 undead creatures below. The mummy lord was the first to act, throwing out his sarcophagus toward the bone demon below the little skeleton. Numerous wraiths flew out of the apparition, once again heading toward the little skeleton in an orderly formation. The huge knight guided his flaming horse, looking up at the incoming little little skeleton while charging toward him. Under the momentum of his charge, he threw out the 2-meter-long broadsword, slashing toward the little skeleton. His throw possessed an impressive force, appearing extremely powerful. The little skeleton drew the spear before suddenly thrusting it forward. The long spear was like a sponge, absorbing the rich death chi in the surroundings before flying out like lightning toward the incoming broadsword. With a clang, the knight's broadsword descended toward the ground. At the same time, the bone demon flapped its wings, pushing the mummy lord's sarcophagus aside. As for the wraiths sent by the apparition to attack, they were obstructed by the purple demon eyes' purple rays of light even before they could get close to the little skeleton. The purple rays of light seemed to have suddenly formed an invisible barrier, and the hundreds of wraiths were simply unable to charge through the barrier. Han Sha-O coordinated with the other undead creatures and shot out 2 rows of bone spears. However, the bone spears were similarly repelled by the invisible barrier created from the light of the purple demon eye descending from high above. This made Han Sha-O even more amazed. How did the little skeleton control the demon eye of data that they obtained from the forest trolls to achieve such a miraculous effect? Bone spears conjured with Han Sha-O's Grand Magus leveled mental strength had strong penetrative strength. Although they were unable to pierce through those incomparably firm physical defenses, the barrier should theoretically be able to obstruct the formless wraiths but shouldn't be able to block the powerful bone spears. However, the truth was actually so inconceivable. Han Sha-O gradually felt that the little skeleton was becoming more and more mysterious. After the little skeleton blocked all their attacks, he guided the bone demon to circle around toward the mummy lord and the apparition. The knight who had just caught his descending broadsword was a distance away from the mummy lord and the apparition and didn't have enough time to assist them. Han Sha-O was in comparison much closer to the mummy lord and the apparition. Seeing the mummy lord and the apparition's panicked expressions, Han Sha-O took the initiative to transmit a message: "I'll assist the 2 of you." Han Sha-O immediately rushed toward the mummy lord and the apparition after transmitting his message. As soon as he sent the message, Han Sha-O immediately rushed toward the mummy lord and the apparition. He had already prepared the soul tremor magic as well as communicated with the little skeleton. Once the little skeleton attacked the mummy lord, Han Sha-O would seize the opportunity to unleash soul tremor on the apparition. Regardless the form of the undead creature, their soul was the foundation of their existence. This was the same for the peculiar apparition. If it was taken by surprise by Han Sha-O's soul tremor, even if its soul wasn't destroyed, it would be severely injured. At that time, Han Sha-O and the little skeleton would be able to easily kill the apparition first. After that, with Han Sha-O obstructing the mummy lord and the little skeleton directly killing the huge knight, they would be able to completely control the situation. None of the 3 undead creatures would be able to escape from the schemes of Han Sha-O and the little skeleton. Han Sha-O's plan was extremely good. If the situation proceeded as planned, that would be everything he could wish for. However, just as Han Sha-O's consciousness firmly locked onto the apparition and was ready to eliminate the apparition at any time, his consciousness suddenly felt a faint fluctuation from the depths of the pitch-black spring. The fluctuation was extremely slight, as though it had been accidentally leaked due to a soul being excessively excited. If Han Sha-O's consciousness had not improved to its current state, it would perhaps have been hard for him to sense that weak fluctuation. As the fluctuation seemed to contain an ancient aura, it was obvious that there was a formidable undead creature hiding in the spring. This formidable undead creature was unable to be detected by the nearby night apparition and even the little skeleton, sufficiently illustrating its strength. Han Sha-O's consciousness hurriedly circulated attentively, comprehending that an intentionally leaked aura with added caution. Han Sha-O was suddenly alarmed, momentarily matching that aura with a formidable undead creature recorded in necromancy books. The strongest existence known in general to necromancers was the bone dragon. The pitch-black spring had actually contained an extremely cunning bone dragon. The bone dragon has always been a domineering undead creature in the netherworld. Apart from a few more frightening unknown existences, the bone dragon, skeleton king and zombie king were deemed the highest ranked undead creatures. In the profound continent, necromancers had to reach the rank of sacred magus to be able to summon bone dragons. The bone dragon had always known as the strongest undead creature. This bone dragon that had concealed itself in the spring from beginning to end had made use of the wisps of smoke overflowing the serene luster gem above its head to attract strong undead creatures to this location. Its intentions were extremely clear for all to see. see. It seems that the drop of serene luster gem in the middle of the pitch-black spring ought to have always been the bone dragon's bait to lure in strong undead creatures. The huge night mummy lord apparition as well as Han Shao had all fallen into the bone dragon's trap. If Han Shao's consciousness had not suddenly sensed the slight fluctuation that arose from the bone dragon's excitement, he reckoned that the one who benefits eventually would have been the bone dragon. As he charged toward the apparition, Han Shao hurriedly communicated with the little skeleton, describing everything that he had just sensed to the little skeleton before inquiring if the little skeleton possessed the strength to defeat the bone dragon. "Father, I would definitely be able to kill and behead the bone dragon in the future. However, I'm unable to do that now. I still do not have that strength for the time being." The little skeleton sent a message over, on one hand stating that he possessed the possibility of infinite evolutions, while on the other hand he stated that he temporarily didn't have the power to deal with the bone dragon. When Han Shao heard that the little skeleton wasn't a match for the bone dragon, his brain rapidly worked. When he neared the apparition, he immediately issued a different instruction to the little skeleton. The mummy lord's sarcophagus suddenly smashed toward the little skeleton while the apparition erratically retreated while unleashing an unknown enchantment. The wraiths that had emerged from its body suddenly assembled into a gigantic network of wraiths attempting to trap the little skeleton. Han Shao materialized a bone shield. The huge sinister bone shield suddenly obstructed the mummy lord's way, establishing a solid defense for the mummy lord and the apparition. This allowed the mummy lord and apparition to relax, only focusing on attacking the little skeleton. When the little skeleton who was riding the bone demon saw that he was about to be trapped by the apparition's network of wraiths, the bone demon suddenly changed its direction, descending toward the pitch-black spring. While the undead creatures had yet to react, the 7 bone spurs on the little skeleton's back suddenly shot out toward the sinister-looking plant. He also firmly threw his javelin-like 3-meter bone spear into the middle of the spring. A frightening roar suddenly sounded from the depths of the lifeless spring. The pitch-black spring suddenly boiled, forming huge waves. Bone spears condensed from the surrounding surging death chi suddenly shot into the depths of the boiling spring, appearing to have pierced the extremely cunning bone dragon, causing the bone dragon to temporarily be unable to emerge from the depths of the spring. Right at this moment, the little skeleton's 7 bone spurs shot toward the sinister-looking plant, completely chopping through the plant's rhizomes. Faint blue smoke started to leak out from the serene luster gem that seemed to be supported by numerous withered branches and leaves. After chopping through the plant, the 7 bone spurs seized the opportunity to congregate and lift up the serene luster gem, which flew into the little skeleton's palm in the blink of an eye. The 3-meter-long bone spear suddenly flew out from within the ground, resembling lightning as it returned to the little skeleton's hand. The little skeleton then urged the bone demon to fly toward Han Shao without even looking at the rapidly boiling pitch-black spring. "Treacherous, despicable skeleton, I bone dragon Zasika will inevitably exterminate you." A loud roar could be heard from underground as a huge bone dragon whose whole body was made up of steel-like long bones suddenly rose out of the spring, giving off a formidable death chi which spread through the entire valley. The huge night mummy lord and the apparition, who were about to attack the little skeleton from all directions, suddenly glanced at each other in terror before frantically fleeing toward the surroundings of the valley, ignoring the little skeleton. The lower-ranked zombie warriors and hate warriors seemed to be petrified in fear, instinctively submitting themselves and not daring to move from their positions. Chapter 387, Absorbing the serene luster gem. The extremely cunning bone dragon Zasika was around 15 meters long. His body was made out of thick and solid white bones, as though it was built from the hardest iron and stone. Its body was also overflowing in rich death chi. When the bone dragon roared, all the higher-ranked undead creatures started to flee, while the low-ranked undead creatures stood still, shivering under the pressure of the bone dragon's imposing aura. The netherworld's bone dragon was different from the profound continent's standard dragon race. As a special clan of dragons that were born in the netherworld, bone dragons possessed enormous strength from the moment they were born. This was because they were formed from pure white bones that were resistant to the majority of physical and magical attacks. Bone dragons were peculiar creatures brought up in the netherworld's unusual environment. They were also able to nimbly manipulate the netherworld's death chi, even possessing a few mystical dragon breath abilities. This resulted in them being more powerful than most dragon clans in the profound continent. The three undead creatures that had planned to surround and attack the little skeleton had already fled in different directions upon hearing the bone dragon's roar, no longer interested in attacking the little skeleton. The little skeleton who had obtained the serene luster gem while bone dragon Zasika wasn't paying attention immediately flew toward Hansha-O. When he was about to reach Hansha-O immediately abandoned the skeletal body he had condensed from death chi and willed his consciousness to float by the little skeleton's side. Once Hansha-O's consciousness reached the little skeleton's side, the little skeleton shoved the serene luster gem into Hansha-O's wraith-like consciousness without a second thought. He then urged the bone demon to escape into the distance. When the bone dragon flew out of the pitch-black spring, it immediately emitted the imposing aura of a high-ranked undead creature. Once the numerous undead creatures had fled, he stared at the rapidly fleeing little skeleton and roared, "Sinister, despicable skeleton, you won't be able to escape." After uttering a long loud cry into the boundless sky, the bone dragon directly pursued the little skeleton. The bone demon beneath the little skeleton had been remolded by the little skeleton with the bones of the supreme ranked magical creature found within the taboo land of the profound continent. Within the netherworld, the flying speed of the remolded bone demon was actually extremely quick. Even the lightning quick bone dragon Zasika wasn't able to catch up in a short period of time. At this moment, the serene luster gem that the little skeleton casually stuffed into Hansha-O's consciousness suddenly blended with the mental energy within his consciousness. A mysterious mental energy suddenly entered Hansha-O's consciousness, gradually combining with the original mental energy within. Hansha-O suddenly trembled. This method of growing his mental strength had the same feeling as when he was imbued with mental strength under the cemetery of death. Hansha-O could almost confirm immediately that the item that had improved his mental strength in the cemetery of death must have also been a serene luster gem. However, this wasn't the time to ponder why there would be a serene luster gem in the cemetery of death. Having had prior experience, Hansha-O immediately absorbed the mental energy flowing out from the serene luster gem into his consciousness to his heart's content. He also tried his utmost in seizing the chance to refine the serene luster gem's mysterious energy. Out of a sudden, an incomparably huge amount of mental energy rushed into Hansha-O's consciousness. This caused a sharp pain to spread out soon after. Hansha-O was dizzy and wasn't sure what he should do. Arg. As Hansha-O gave out a resonant shout in pain back in the profound continent, the skeletal staff his true body was holding onto whistled sharply and endlessly. Hansha-O's originally muddled eyes gradually regained clarity. While a huge amount of mental energy was still revolving within his mind, Hansha-O suddenly felt that he was holding something hard in his left hand. Looking down, he saw that it was actually the mysterious skeletal staff. Hansha-O was shocked but became ecstatic shortly after. He understood that he had once again returned unfathomably to the profound continent from the netherworld. Excessively excited, Hansha-O didn't ponder any further, hastily discarding all distracting thoughts and started melding the remaining pure mental energy flowing within his consciousness with his original mental energy. At this moment he was filled with immense joy. After an unknown period of time, Hansha-O gradually sensed that the mental energy from the netherworld's serene luster gem had been fully absorbed. At that moment an intense shout was transmitted from the little skeleton in the netherworld. Hansha-O suddenly recalled the recent experience of escaping from the netherworld and remembered that the little skeleton was still being pursued by bone dragon Zasika. The little skeleton's shout was obviously a cry for help. Hansha-O didn't hesitate, chanting the lowest ranked necromancy spell. The little skeleton riding the bone demon abruptly arrived in the hidden underground room. The little skeleton had actually come out unscathed. However, the bone demon he was riding on had more than 10 of its bones broken, probably by the bone dragon. Once he arrived from the netherworld, the little skeleton patted his chest like a human while still having lingering fears. He then transmitted a message to Hansha-O that cunning bone dragon is truly extremely frightening. However, I will definitely make him pay in the future. Hansha-O looked toward the little skeleton. His heart truly had unbounded emotions. This little skeleton who had the ambition to kill the bone dragon was the same fellow that helped him at that time to clear the garbage in the middle of the night. "Father, how did you enter my world?" the little skeleton asked its purple demon eye, listening as it looked at Hansha-O. Hansha-O had gradually adapted to the way the little skeleton addressed him. He laughed bitterly as he shook his head, replying, "I have no idea." However, I understand that it has something to do with this skeletal staff. For the time being, I still have not fully comprehended how it happens. However, I believe I would be able to be clear about the situation very quickly. After Han Sha-O explained the situation to the little skeleton, he knitted his brows, inquiring, "Do you know what exactly is the Serene Luster Gem that I absorbed?" This type of Serene Luster Gem is an extremely rare item in our world. It can temper our souls, causing our souls to become purer. It is extremely beneficial to our evolution. The little skeleton explained for a while, pausing for a moment before continuing. "Father, in our world there similarly are some unusual items as well as peculiar existences. For example, that apparition had evolved from a wraith. That huge knight is a soul from another plane that descended into our world and was developed from an evil knight's body after absorbing death chi within the world." The little skeleton seemed to have planned to explain the world he knew to Han Sha-O, taking great pains to explain the situation in the nether world to Han Sha-O as though to sweep away the misunderstandings Han Sha-O had of the nether world. From the little skeleton's descriptions, Han Sha-O gradually realized that he still had a one-sided understanding of the nether world. It turns out that the creatures in the nether world were not limited to those that he knew from necromancy texts. The undead creatures that were listed on necromancy texts were those that ancient necromancers were aware of and had found the corresponding summoning spell. There were also a few evolved or mutated undead creatures as well as eccentric undead creatures that had been naturally produced by death chi in a particular occasion at a particular location. These undead creatures were not known to necromancers and had never been successfully summoned. These special existences were equally formidable, so much so that some of them were stronger than bone dragons. However, previous necromancers had never encountered them nor had the way to summon them. Hence they did not exist in necromancy books. However, for the little skeleton who had spent much time in the nether world, he who had the same origin as these undead creatures naturally understood a few peculiarities that previous necromancers didn't know of. According to the little skeleton's narration, Han Sha-O also found out that the nether world was split into regions and territories. Some of the most ancient formidable existences occupied vast territories, ceaselessly campaigning against one another. There were even extremely formidable undead creatures that possessed the strength to tear apart the restrictions of their position, having the frightening strength to travel across the world with their own strength. "Father, I ought to return." While Han Sha-O was slowly comprehending the little skeleton's words, the little skeleton suddenly transmitted a message. Much time has passed. As Han Sha-O also had a mental connection to the Earth zombie and the other zombies, he could directly send the little skeleton to their side. In that case, the little skeleton and bone dragon Zasika would be separated by an extremely large distance, and the bone dragon would naturally be unable to endanger the little skeleton again. Once the little skeleton reminded Han Sha-O, he smiled as he nodded his head and then sent the little skeleton back to the netherworld. Even after the little skeleton had left, Han Sha-O still pondered on the little skeleton's narration. The things that the little skeleton had just mentioned exceeded Han Sha-O's comprehension, causing Han Sha-O to momentarily be unable to adapt. Han Sha-O had gained a new level of understanding of the netherworld from the little skeleton's descriptions. He was also clear that that world was different from what he first imagined. It seemed like not all the creatures in the netherworld could be summoned by necromancers. Many formidable undead creatures that had transcended the bindings of their position would definitely not be restricted by the strength of a necromancer's contract. Shaking his head, Han Sha-O stopped thinking about matters concerning the netherworld. Han Sha-O then chanted a spell, and utilizing his mental energy, rows of bone spears took shape in front of him, silently forming motionlessly in the air. Han Sha-O simply counted the number of bone spears and was pleasantly surprised to find out that the number of bone spears had increased by a third. This meant that Han Sha-O's mental strength had indeed improved substantially. Although his mental strength was still within the realm of Grand Magus, the stronger his mental strength, the might from a spell would also be greater. Currently, Han Sha-O could release that many more bone spears with the same spell. This sufficiently proved that Han Sha-O's mental strength had indeed undergone substantial improvement in the netherworld. Serene Luster Gem, truly a good item. However, Why would a serene luster gem appear under the cemetery of death? Also, why would the skeletal staff be able to let the soul enter the netherworld? Could it be that there was some kind of connection between the cemetery of death and the creatures in the undead world? Han Shao knitted his brows as he contemplated. Han Shao couldn't resolve this question in a short time. However, he knew that the cemetery of death definitely contained many secrets and planned to carefully explore the cemetery of death after a period of time to take a look if there were other items that he had yet to discover. After his consciousness had entered the netherworld, Han Shao had lost track of time. Now that he had returned to the profound continent, Han Shao didn't know how long had passed. Hastily exiting the hidden room and returning to the ground level of his official residence and calling Steward Callas over. Steward Callas immediately spoke when he rushed over. Lord Count, where have you been the past few days? Miss Phoebe has come over 3 times to look for you, and His Majesty has also requested for you to head to the royal palace and meet him. Furthermore, there has been bad rumors about you spreading around, making me extremely anxious. What bad rumors? Han Shao first grasped the main issue, inquiring from Callas about the harmful news about himself. This. Steward Callas hummed and Han only replied fearfully when Han Shao stared at him. There has been rumors spreading that you are a member of the Calamity Church. Very few ordinary people know about the Calamity Church, but many nobles and people of status understood that the Calamity Church was an evil organization. Han Shao was shocked when he heard Callas's response. The Calamity Church was the symbol of evil in the eyes of many nobles. Of everyone in the continent that knew of the Calamity Church's existence, there shouldn't be many that held good impressions of them. Han Shao had never dared to have too much contact with the Calamity Church precisely because he was afraid of leaving such an impression. Never would he have thought that although he always kept a distance from them, such a situation still happened in the end. Without much consideration, Han Shao knew who the rumors had originated from. Apart from the Church of Light and Lawrence's political enemies, Han Shao did not have many enemies within the Lancelot Kingdom. In recent days it was the moment for Han Shao, who was rising rapidly within the kingdom, to have major undertakings. However, it was precisely this rumor that could ruin Han Shao. This matter was quite thorny. Han Shao hesitated a moment before replying. Steward Callas, I understand. You can withdraw first and help me invite Prince Lawrence and Miss Phoebe over. Just tell them that I want to talk to them tonight. After giving Callas his orders, Han Shao immediately left the manor. He hesitated a moment before heading to the Dark Mantel's headquarters to look for Candide. When Candide saw Han Shao, he immediately said, Why have you only appeared now? Come with me to meet the king. I'm aware of your affairs and have already spoken to His Majesty about it previously. This matter has become quite huge. We must handle it carefully. While on their way to the royal palace, Candide pointed out that the rumors had originated from the Church of Light eldest Prince Charles as well as the Grand Duke. As one of the 3 heavyweights of Dark Mantle, it was nationally very simple for Candide to investigate such a matter. Han Shao and Candide discussed for a while before directly entering the royal palace through the Dark Mantle's teleporting array, immediately heading for King Utter's palace. Chapter 388, His Majesty's Plea. An old man past his prime sat on the throne, living the last vestiges of his life. The aura of life seemed to be slipping away from his body at every moment. He could only keep his frail body straight by leaning against the throne. His originally bright eyes had also been veiled by a layer of gray. Han Shao followed Candide inside. Glancing at the declining Utter, Han Shao understood that his death was imminent. It was no wonder that the princes of the Lancelot Empire were so brazen in their attempts to seize power. Your Majesty, Count Brian has come to see you, Candide said respectfully after saluting the Emperor. Utter coughed violently, his gray eyes gradually showing a hint of vitality. Forcing himself upright, he swept his eyes over Candide and Han Shao, ultimately fixing his gaze on Han Shao as he asked weakly, Brian, Candide has already mentioned to me your achievements in Bretel City over the past few months. You've done quite well. Your Majesty flatters me. This was my duty. Han Shao Sha'o had discussed with Candide on the way here and understood that it was best that he watched his mouth when speaking to such a person, only responding to any questions asked. I heard news circulating outside about you having some sort of relationship with the Calamity Church. Ho ho, that's rather interesting. With your clean origins and the contributions you made for the Lancelot Empire, how could they implicate you with a sinister church like them? Muttered as though he was speaking to himself. Your Majesty should realize that those are purely rumors fabricated by enemies, Han Shao replied. In that case, do you know who is making up such rumors and what their intentions are? Looked at Han Shao and inquired. Han Shao replied while shaking his head, I don't know. Candide, you can leave first. I have something I want to speak to Brian about alone. Did not question this matter in detail, glancing at Candide instead and instructed in a soft voice. Candide didn't respond, bowing politely toward Uttard before turning around to leave the main hall. He only gave Han Shao a meaningful glance as he passed by to hint that Han Shao should not say things that ought not to be said. After Candide left, Uttard suddenly sighed and said, among my sons I feel I owe Lawrence the most. I heard you and Lawrence are very close, is that true? Han Shao was startled, unable to really grasp Uttard's intentions. Most of the nobles in Awesome City were in the know about the relationship between him and Lawrence, so it wasn't at all strange for Uttard to know about his relationship with Lawrence. Han Shao hesitated for a moment, then nodded honestly and replied, yes, Your Majesty. In that case you're definitely supporting Lawrence? Uttard asked once more. Yes, Your Majesty, Han Shao answered once again. Uttard was silent for a long time, his two pupils affixed intently on Han Shao. It was only when Uttard saw Han Shao looking a little uneasy that he spoke. Brian, there are some matters that I want to discuss with you. Your Majesty, feel free to tell me anything. As your subject I will naturally willing to share some of your worries. Han Shao replied again. Uttard sighed. He suddenly stared at Han Shao, saying, Brian, I hope you can promise me one thing. Regardless of how my other three sons treat you, please spare their lives. Han Shao was momentarily speechless, suspiciously looking toward Uttard as he inquired, why has Your Majesty said such a thing? Brian, if you agree to my terms, I will hand the throne to Lawrence and help you two to consolidate the power of Lancelot Empire. Uttard stared fixedly on Han Shao, speaking prudently. Han Shao felt extremely stirred up, astonished as he looked at Uttard, momentarily unsure what was wrong with Uttard to have actually said such an ineffable sentence. He simply looked at Uttard in a daze, forgetting to reply. As long as you agree to my terms, I'll assist you and Lawrence. What do you think? Uttard immediately followed up, appearing somewhat anxious, so much so that it contained a hint of pleading. As the true ruler of Lancelot Empire, as long as Uttard hasn't passed away, even if he was extremely ill, he was still the person who held the utmost power in Lancelot Empire. However, at this moment Uttard's tone while speaking to Han Shao unexpectedly had an odd hint of pleading. This was something Han Shao could never have expected. In such a moment Han Shao even thought if Uttard's illness was too severe that caused Uttard to absent-mindedly say such ridiculous things. However, when Han Shao carefully observed Uttard, he discovered that although Uttard's body was incomparably weak, his spirit wasn't confused at all. That proved that Uttard's emotional state was indeed normal. While Han Shao was still extremely astounded, Uttard asked once again. Han Shao rapidly racked his brains and then probed Uttard. As long as I spare the lives of the three princes? Uttard had a delighted expression as he rapidly nodding his head, hurriedly saying, that's right, as long as you spare their lives. You can strip them of all their power and even imprison them in a small cell as long as they are able to survive. In that case I'll agree to your terms, Your Majesty. Han Shao no longer hesitated, immediately responding. Lancelot Empire's true ruler, His Majesty. Uttard actually visibly sighed in relief. His weak expression gave a slight smile as he waved his hand as he said, Brian, I now confer you the title of Marquis. In addition, I will command Space Sacred Magus Mr. Sabakas to help establish a magic transporting array in Bretel City, as well as help you eliminate the unfavorable news about you. Also. Uttard suddenly narrated a series of promises, causing Han Shao to be stunned, staring blankly as he wondered what was going on with Uttard today. When Uttard finished narrating his promises, he then said, Brian, you can take your leave. I hope you will not mention today's matter to anyone else, not even to Candide or Lawrence. Your Majesty, I'll promise you. However, Could you tell me the reason? I am truly unable to comprehend why you would make such a decision. Han Shao looked flabbergasted at Uttered while he asked. Uttered shook his head laughing bitterly as he replied, it's better if you aren't aware. This is for your benefit. You may leave now. Han Shao couldn't make sense of the matter, looking at Uttered bafflingly. He stared blankly for a moment before knitting his brows, bowing to Uttered before exiting. He was feeling extremely puzzled but didn't know who he could rant to. When Han Shao left, Uttered seemed to age even more, sighing as he said, as a father I have done all I can for the three of you. Hopefully all of you are able to survive after I die. Space Sacred Magus Sabakas, an old astrologer, Madame Grace, abruptly appeared before Uttered. Madame Grace was extremely pale, appearing more likely than Uttered to die. There didn't seem to be much vitality in her whole body. When Uttered saw the two of them appear, he sighed again. He looked toward old astrologer Madame Grace and said, Madam, I've never doubted your judgment all these years. You said that Brian will truly help Lancelot Empire prosper? Grace wiggled her lips as though wanting to drive away the thick wrinkles by her mouth, replying with a weak voice, Your Majesty, on your request I've consumed my vitality to make a divination. I only know that whoever this person assists, that person will be able to become the new king. As long as he is present in Lancelot Empire will not perish. That is all. That is already sufficient. I didn't expect that the person influencing my Lancelot Empire's future would actually be such a young fellow. Uttered muttered to himself before looking toward Grace and Sabakas, suddenly saying, my days are numbered. I hope that you will promise me one thing after I die. Your Majesty, you need not exhort me. I think I might leave this world before you. I have also been extremely tired in recent years. My life has also finally ought to reach its end. Old astrologer Grace faintly sighed as she helplessly replied, Uttered, Madam, I'm sorry. You had consumed your vitality for Lancelot Empire. Uttered understood that every time old astrologer Madame Grace made a divination, it would consume her vitality. The more complicated the matter, the more vitality would be consumed. The divination this time was regarding the fate of the entire Lancelot Empire and had completely exhausted her vitality. Her death could be said to be single-handedly caused by Uttered. However, as it concerned Lancelot Empire's future, Uttered had no other choice and could only have old astrologer Grace give some clarity. Even without old astrologer Madame Grace's foretelling, matters might still progress along the same trajectory. However, the struggle for power among the princes would undoubtedly result in irreversible damage to Lancelot Empire's overall strength. In that situation, even if Lawrence succeeded in seizing the throne, Lancelot Empire's strength would be far from before. Uttered was precisely afraid of such a situation occurring. Hence he would rather have old astrologer Grace consume her vitality to foretell the future. This was so that he could minimize the loss in the kingdom's strength, so that when Lawrence succeeded the throne, Lancelot Empire would still be as prosperous as before. You need not apologize. My teacher had also exhausted her vitality and died for the sake of Lancelot Empire. Perhaps this is precisely the destiny for us astrologers. Old astrologer Madame Grace helplessly sighed before looking towards Sabakas and said, in the limited time I have remaining, I hope you can send me to places I have never seen before. Don't worry, no matter where you want to go, I'm able to bring you there. Sabakas amiably smiled as he replied. He then turned his head toward Lancelot Empire's king Uttered and asked, Your Majesty, what did you want to tell me a moment ago? If Brian does not abide by his promise, I hope that you can help me kill him. Uttered hesitated a moment before replying, Sabakas, Your Majesty, I can only promise you that I will try my utmost. If the day comes when I might not be able to deal with him, I hope you would forgive me. Space Sacred Magus Sabakas carefully thought it over before replying, Uttered. When one reaches a similar realm as Sabakas, they would long since considered to have surpassed authority. Even Lancelot Empire's king would not have the authority to order him to do things he isn't willing to do. Sabakas vaguely knew a few things from astrologer Grace's prophecy, and that was why he replied Uttered in this way. Uttered nodded, smiling as he said, In that case I can only thank you. All right, Your Majesty probably has many matters to attend to. We wouldn't continue disturbing you then. Sabakas replied, neither haughty nor humble. He looked toward old astrologer Grace as a white light trapped around the two of them. They then disappeared in a flash. Lancelot Empire's king Uttered then started to help Lawrence pave the way to the throne. When Han Shao returned to his residence from the palace, he discovered that Lawrence and Phoebe had not waited till the evening and had already been waiting. It looked like they were extremely eager to meet Han Shao. Phoebe's eyes were glistening, her line of sight the never leaving Han Shao from beginning to end. When Han Shao had sent his servants away and led the two of them to an inner living room, Phoebe protested coquettishly with a hint of rage, "What kind of guy are you? Having returned to Austin City yet you never came over to look for me? Has your time in Bretel City been too satisfying that you have forgotten this old me?" Along the way Han Shao was somewhat muddle-headed, continuously pondering over what King Uttard had told him. He was unable to understand what was going on with Uttard to have actually made such a queer proposal. Han Shao only reacted when he heard Phoebe protesting coquettishly, couldn't help but smile bitterly as he replied, "My lady, of all people to forget, I would never forget you. You should know that whenever I obtain something good, the first person I think of is precisely you. If not, why would Starry Sky arrive in your hands so quickly?" Hearing Han Shao's reply, Phoebe's beautiful expression had an added delight and her voice became much gentler as she tenderly questioned, "In that case, what shameful deeds have you done ever since you returned to Austin City?" "I've come over a few times, but the steward had always said that you weren't within the residence." "That was because I had to handle some proper business. The majority of the time was spent in the Dark Metals headquarters participating in meetings. I had also just visited the palace. In short, I have not been idle," Han Shao explained to Phoebe. All right, the two of you can slowly chat after I leave," Lawrence teased before looking toward Han Shao and asked, "Brian, you have just returned from the palace. What did my royal father talk to you about?" When Lawrence spoke out, Phoebe blushed as though thinking that once Lawrence leaves she would engage in wonderful matters with Han Shao. She suddenly became silent while her face becoming red. Han Shao knew what Lawrence was concerned about, recalling his recent agreement with His Majesty. He couldn't help but have a bout of suspicion once again. He then smiled bitterly as he shook his head, replying, "Lawrence, I've promised His Majesty that I wouldn't divulge our conversation to anyone else. His Majesty had especially urged me before I left to not tell you about our discussion." Lawrence became solemn and distracted, hesitating for a moment before asking, "Then could you tell me if I was mentioned in your conversation, and did the matters you discussed to my benefit?" Han Shao thought for a moment before nodding and replied, "Lawrence, I can definitively tell you the focus of my conversation with His Majesty is precisely about you. Merely they are all matters that are advantageous to you. I believe the likelihood of you obtaining the throne will increase dramatically." Is that for real, Brian? You are speaking the truth?" Hearing Han Shao's reply, Lawrence was clearly indescribably ecstatic, to the extent that he suddenly stood up from his chair. Lawrence, who was unable to hold back the ecstasy in his heart, directly stood in front of Han Shao, pressing down on Han Shao's shoulders, impatiently inquiring as he looked into Han Shao's eyes. Han Shao gave his affirmation, repetitively nodding his head as he said, "That's right. Although I can divulge the specifics of our conversations, I can guarantee that your royal father would definitely pave the way for you. Lawrence, your fortune has arrived." Lawrence endlessly laughed to his heart's content, his wild side being revealed after experiencing a long period of oppression. He laughed heartily as he said, "Thank you, Brian. You are my luck. No matter what you and royal father spoke about, I believe you definitely played a large part. I will never forget your kindness." Lawrence's mind was extremely nimble, realizing that Han Shao was a key person just from his words. Otherwise, why would Uttard not find others to talk to only looking for him? "Brian, you wouldn't be joking, right? Don't tell me that His Highness plans to support Senior Lawrence?" Phoebe reacted from her charming and gentle reverie, having a shocked expression as she looked at Han Shao as if she didn't believe what Han Shao was saying. "Don't ask me about the specifics. Honestly speaking, even now I still can't believe it myself. However, the truth is as such. You will be aware of it very soon." Han Shao spread his arms in a helpless posture as he explained to Phoebe. Lawrence had yet calmed down from his surprise, animatedly saying, "All right, in that case I'll return early to prepare. If it turns out as you said, I need to immediately make arrangements." "Go ahead, you should indeed. Make proper preparations." Han Shao gladly agreed. "Senior, you only remember your own matters. Did you forget what we discussed just now? Brian is currently in great danger. If you don't help him now, he would be labeled as a member of an evil church by Charles and the others. Seeing Lawrence wanting to leave, Phoebe snorted lightly, unable to resist rebuking Lawrence. Lawrence slapped his own head. That was the reason why they were here. He first smiled apologetically toward Han Shao before saying with a grave expression, Brian, there are currently some rumors that are extremely harmful to you. I think we should carefully figure out a strategy to handle this. This matter is disseminated by Church of Lights Cassie and Charles. Their aim is to ruin the reputation and image you had exhaustingly established in Bretel City. We shouldn't bother about these matters. His Majesty has already agreed to help me clear up this matter. Han Shao calmly replied Lawrence. Lawrence and Phoebe looked at each other, both having stunned expressions. Seeing Lawrence's expression, Han Shao couldn't help but smile as he said, alright, you should just leave first and be busy with your own matters. There's no need to be troubled about these matters. Your royal father will help us with them. Alright, then I won't bother the two of you any longer. Lawrence understood, winking at Han Shao and Phoebe laughing as he left. Hey, what's with your expression? Damn it, you have been led astray by Han Shao. Phoebe's charming face was captivatingly red as she rained curses towards Lawrence's rear view. Once Lawrence left, Han Shao smiled as he walked toward Phoebe, pulling her into his embrace, carrying the flailing Phoebe directly to his bedroom. Along the way he stroked his hands up and down restlessly along Phoebe's body. A while later Phoebe had lazily curled up on Han Shao's wide chest, her whole body not having the slightest strength. However, Han Shao was still in high spirits without any signs of exhaustion. He instead conveniently took out a necromancy book, assiduously studying it. Phoebe had not used any of the aura in her body. Her exhaustion was purely from her physical body. Looking at Han Shao, who was in great spirits, Phoebe had a sweet smiling expression. Her complaints from these few days had all disappeared, unable to conceal her extremely contentamorous feelings. She was obviously extremely pleased. A strand of mysterious energy flowed within Phoebe's body, slowly circulating through Phoebe's limbs and bones, nourishing Phoebe's body. It gave Phoebe an extremely comfortable feeling, as through that strand of energy was replenishing her body, helping her body gradually recover and even strengthen. Phoebe finally examined the refinement and nourishment of that strand of energy, suddenly reacting. This mysterious energy came from Han Shao. Previously, every time after she had experienced pleasure with Han Shao, Phoebe seemed to sense the existence of such an energy even while dazed. Merely the previous few times Phoebe had been overly exhausted and had fallen asleep immediately and had never sensed it as clearly before. However, Phoebe could sense that her body was improving. Previously, when she refined her night, and her body seemed to also be purified. The training of her aura had been much easier as compared to the past. It also seemed like the changes in her body was the reason why Phoebe was able to become a great swordsman so quickly. Slowly sensing for a while, Phoebe couldn't help but fiercely gaze at Han Shao, who was solemnly studying the necromancy book. She suddenly understood in her ear that every time they had engaged in pleasure, Han Shao would send a strand of unknown energy into her body, helping her remold her body, causing her body's state to become better. Brian, Phoebe suddenly whispered softly, raising her head to look at Han Shao. Han Shao, who was studying a bone demon's characteristic, slightly grunted in response, smiling as he looked at Phoebe, his large hand conveniently smacking Phoebe's perky and round butt as he asked teasingly, yes, you want more? Phoebe's stunningly beautiful face reddened, blushing in shame as she pulling up the thin quilt to cover her body, hiding her nosebleed-inducing perfect curves, saying softly, no, my whole body is already devoid of strength, you damned fellow. Hee, what do you want to say then? Han Shao put down the necromancy book in his hand, his left hand tenderly helping her pull the quilt to conceal her jade-like skin, smiling as he asked, have you always left behind something special within my body every time we pleasured each other? Phoebe's face was red as she inquired in a low voice. Of course I have indeed. Left behind something special. Hey, those are the seeds of life, the original essence in creating humans. Merely they haven't been able to germinate. Why have you asked about this? Could it be that you want to ask why your stomach has not become big? Oh, you can't blame me, perhaps you haven't worked hard enough? Han Shao smiled deviously as he replied Phoebe. When Phoebe saw Han Shao's evil smile, she knew that he must have misunderstood her question. She couldn't help but embarrassedly reproached him, not that thing. I am referring to the energy that helped me alter my body. When Phoebe said that, Han Shao was suddenly enlightened, replying, so you were referring to that? Don't worry, that energy is only beneficial to your body and would absolutely not cause any harm. You shouldn't care too much about it. In any case, you only only need to know that it would cause your body to improve. I know, of course I know the benefits that energy brings about to my body. I'm only worried if it would cause harm to your strength." Phoebe naturally understood the changes to her body. However, as a young great sword master, Phoebe knew that no matter what kind of energy leaves the main body, it would have an effect on the person involved. What she was worried about was whether Hansha-O was harmed. Hey, you need not worry. This is called duo cultivation. When I transmit energy into you, I'm actually also obtaining some energy from your body. It's just that you aren't aware of it. Otherwise, why would I make you perform so many unusual positions? This is actually a type of martial technique. To think that you still have wild thoughts. Hansha-O smiled as he explained to Phoebe. Listening to Hansha-O's explanation, Phoebe's blush had spread from her neck to her whole body. She couldn't help but hammer Hansha-O's chest, saying, "Nonsense. Since when was there a technique that was practiced this way? You wanting me to assume so many embarrassing positions was simply to satisfy your unusual hobby. You evil person, still wanting to lie to me." Helplessly shrugging his shoulders, Hansha-O smiled bitterly as he explained, "My lady, I am truly not deceiving you. There are countless martial techniques that you don't know about. However, this technique indeed exists. The positions I want you to assume also really have special purposes. It is just that you haven't carefully experienced it and have instead been lost in pleasure. If you are able to carefully comprehend it the next time, you would know that I'm telling the truth." Phoebe was only somewhat convinced by Hansha-O's explanation, staring blankly at Hansha-O for a while, realizing that Hansha-O didn't seem to be joking. She then softly said, "Brian, you are saying the truth. That is truly a type of martial technique." Nodding his head, Hansha-O smiled as he replied, "Of course. It is precisely through this method that our pleasure would aid in increasing each other's strength. Don't you worry, the energy within your body wouldn't cause me any harm." As Hansha-O explained, although Phoebe was still astonished, she didn't continue questioning this matter. She instead knitted her brows as she pondered. After a while, Phoebe suddenly recalled something, intensely looking at Hansha-O as she asked, "Brian, there's a question I've held back for very long. You must answer me today." "Speak, what's your question?" Hansha-O's large hand caressed Phoebe's smooth back, his eyes squinting as he said lazily, "What's the deal with Emily? Don't tell me that you have no relation with Emily." "HMPH, I've seen her a few times. Her skin and state of her body are simply identical to mine." "Brian, I hope you can honestly tell me about the relationship between the two of you and not lie to me." Phoebe stared fixedly at Hansha-O as she questioned him overbearingly. When Hansha-O heard the name Emily, he unexpectedly shuddered. When Phoebe finished her question, his mind had suddenly become a mess. After hurriedly considered for a moment, Hansha-O sighed as he said, "Since you already know, I won't hide it from you any longer. The previous time in the dark forest, due to my martial technique undergoing cultivation deviation, I raped her while I was unconscious. Since things have reached this point, Hansha-O knew that no amount of concealment would be effective. Thus, he systematically described the matters between Emily and himself. "As I expected, you really had an affair with her. I had always been wondering why her skin was as white and glossy as mine. Great, it turns out it had been nourished by you. Brian, ah Brian, you are truly awesome to actually dare to rape the Betteridge family's daughter-in-law." On one hand, Phoebe was glaring angrily at Hansha-O as she clamored. On the other hand, she wanted to wear her clothes and leave in spite of Hansha-O's obstruction. Hansha-O embraced Phoebe tightly, hurriedly explaining, "Under those circumstances I had no choice. You should know that you are the most important to me. To have been together with Emily was just a coincidence. I don't think it's that simple. That Emily has such a seductive appearance. Is she very good in bed? Did she tempt you till you are confused and disoriented? Do you know that she is Mr. Han's daughter-in-law? That her brother is the terrifying Ms. Hansha-O nodded and then explained, "However, when I raped her, I only took her as a spy of the Empire." Shaking of Hansha-O, Phoebe swiftly wore her clothes, hatefully staring at Hansha-O, her expression filled with resentment as she shouted, "I had already felt that there was something fishy between you and Emily previously at the banquet by Lawrence's father. It looks like you two have known each other since long ago. Emily has gone too far to actually following your bad example in deceiving me." When she finished her sentence, Phoebe had already finished dressing up and was furiously quickly heading out. "Where are you going?" Han Sha-oh was shocked, hastily putting on his clothes. "I'm going to find that coquettish hussy Emily." "Don't follow me, I want to speak to her alone," Phoebe replied with a sentence before rushing out of Han Sha-oh's residence. Chapter 389, Improving Circumstances of the Necromancy Major. Phoebe was furious as she left her last sentence, firmly rejecting Han Sha-oh's plan to follow her. Han Sha-oh, who had gotten up to put on his clothes, hesitated for a while before ultimately deciding not to follow Phoebe. The Betteridge family was a celebrated noble family within the empire. Even though Mr. Han has withdrawn from the military, his influence still remained. If Phoebe went to talk to Emily by herself, it would perhaps not cause much of a problem. However, if Han Sha-oh went along as well, what would happen between the two ladies and Han Sha-oh would be unpredictable. Han Sha-oh definitely didn't want to be screamed at by two girls within the Betteridge family. If that happened, not only would it affect Han Sha-oh's career, it would also ruin the reputation of Phoebe and Emily. Han Sha-oh frowned as he blanked out momentarily, not knowing what he should do. He decided to just send out two mystical demons to follow behind Phoebe. In recent times, Austin City was shrouded in darkness with hidden dangers everywhere. Han Shu was afraid that Phoebe, who supported Lawrence, would encounter trouble. Furthermore, he also wanted to find out what Phoebe wanted to talk to Emily about. If the situation goes south, he would have no choice and be forced to step in. As the mystical demons followed Phoebe to the Betteridge family, contrary to Han Sha-oh's expectations, the originally enraged Phoebe had already concealed her emotions when she reached the doorstep of the Betteridge family and was instead tranquil as she asked the guard if she could meet Emily. When Han Sha-oh saw that Phoebe did not cause a racket the moment she reached the Betteridge family, he couldn't help letting out a breath. He understood that although Phoebe was angry, she still knew to act appropriately. When Emily heard that Phoebe had specially come to visit, she was suddenly startled. She knew she was hiding something, and the previous few times she had met Phoebe, she had faintly felt that something was inappropriate and knew that an intelligent woman like Phoebe would definitely sense something. Now that Phoebe had come to look for her specifically, Emily knew that the trouble that would have come has finally arrived. She calmed her disturbed state of mind and then actively head out to welcome Phoebe. "Hey, Miss Phoebe." It's been a while since we met. To what do I owe this visit?" Emily has been part of Dark Mantle for many years and was still able to show a natural appearance even though she had a guilty conscience, showing a splendid smile as greeting Phoebe like a sister. Miss Emily, isn't that because I miss you?" "Oh, it's been a long time since we met, sister." Emily seems to be looking much younger. "What is your secret? You must share it with me." Phoebe, who has run a business for a long time, was also able to hold in her anger, smiling as she greeted Emily. Emily felt troubled. When Phoebe mentioned her sore spot, she knew that Phoebe did not come with good intentions. Emily naturally knew the cause of the changes to her body. The beautiful fair-skinned Phoebe was in an extremely similar condition as herself. It was naturally self-evident the reason for Phoebe to bring up this matter. "I don't deserve Miss Phoebe's praise. Perhaps it is because there isn't much happening recently, being idle and having slept much more. I definitely don't look younger." Emily smiled as she played down the matter. Seeing that there were still guards around, she couldn't help but lightly chuckle as she walked toward Phoebe, smiling as she said, "Since it is rare for you to come over, let's head to my room to talk about more intimate matters." "That was exactly my intention." Phoebe smiled lightly as she replied, still keeping a natural expression as she walked into the residence with Emily. The two of them looked like a pair of sisters, as though there was simply no friction between them. Han Sha-oh, who had seen and heard the whole conversation between the two of them through a mystical demon, couldn't help but inwardly admire the calmness of both women, and also sort of understood how elegant women fought. It wasn't the loud shouting and screaming he imagined, but was instead a more obscure and implicit battle. After Emily led Phoebe into her personal room, Emily very carefully placed layer upon layer of enchantments around the room, perhaps to prevent their conversation from leaking. Phoebe looked on indifferently as Emily placed soundproofing vision obscuring enchantments, not saying a word. Once Emily had finished placing her enchantments, Han Sha-oh's two mystical demons felt a dark aura gradually spreading out in all directions. After hesitating for a moment, Han Sha-oh withdrew the two mystical demons, having them stay outside the room. In that way, the mystical demons would not be discovered by Emily's enchantments, but he would also not be able to hear their conversation. Having too many women is indeed troublesome. Han Sha-oh couldn't help but sigh. However, He knew that by his nature his self-control in this area was definitely lacking. Just as Han Sha-o was sighing, Steward Callas came in looking for Han Sha-o, handing over a letter while saying respectfully, "Lord Marquis, this is a letter for you." "Lord Marquis?" Han Sha-o was stunned, looking over at Steward Callas before questioning suspiciously. "Callas, did you address me wrongly?" "No, I definitely did not," Steward Callas answered, smiling as he looked toward Han Sha-o before continuing. "Lord Marquis, although His Majesty's official document has not been issued, there's no need for you to keep us in the dark. We're your staff, yet we had to find out from others that His Majesty had conferred upon you a higher title." When Callas made that statement, Han Sha-o had a sudden realization. He understood that Lancelot Empire's King Uhtred must have immediately set out to help Lawrence pave the way once Han Sha-o left the palace. His title of Marquis must have also been announced in advance. Now that even Steward Callas knew about this, it adequately illustrated that King Uhtred had disseminated the news of Han Sha-o's promotion. Han Sha-o could only sigh at King Uhtred's high efficiency. He then knitted his brows and asked, "As for those negative rumors about me, are they still being spread?" "Lord Marquis, His Majesty has already confirmed your innocent background and ordered that no one should doubt your loyalty to the Empire. If anyone dared to spread rumors about you, His Majesty would immediately punish him for slander." Within a day's time there was no longer anyone that dared talk about you being from the Calamity Church. Steward Callas looked at Han Sha-o reverently as he answered sincerely. Han Shu had merely made a trip to the Imperial Palace, yet once he returned His Majesty made a series of major actions suppressing all the negative discussions about Han Sha-o and even conferred the noble title of Marquis upon Han Sha-o. This was ample proof of His Majesty's trust and generosity toward Han Sha-o. Callas was truly convinced by Han Sha-o. However, Callas would never know that within the palace Lancelot Empire's most powerful person actually had a pleading tone when talking to Han Sha-o, not having the slightest arrogant attitude of a superior towards a subordinate. "Who sent the letter?" Han Sha-o nonchalantly asked while looking at the letter. "The person who sent it seemed to be a student of Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. He said that it was Master Fanny that told him to pass this to you. You had previously made it clear to pay special attention to matters regarding Master Fanny. Hence I didn't dare tarry delivering it to you immediately." Steward Callas replied. "That's good." Han Sha-o gave praise before waving his hand for Callas to withdraw. He then opened the envelope to retrieve and read the light green letter within. Fanny's penmanship was deft and graceful. The contents of the letter contained faint attraction, faintly displaying part of Fanny's longing. It also mentioned that today was the first day for the necromancy major to recruit new students, and she hoped that Han Sha-o could find time to make a trip to the necromancy major and perhaps make a speech so as to keep up appearances for the necromancy major. After he finished reading the letter, Han Sha-o's nose was filled with the delicate fragrance of the light green writing paper, as if smelling the refreshing scent on Fanny's body. Remembering Dean Emma's previous expectations of him, Han Sha-o hesitated for a moment before deciding to make a trip to Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. Brimming in the scent of spring, Babylon Academy's yearly recruitment was in full swing. As Lancelot Empire's largest incubator for talent, Babylon Academy of Magic and Force was the place everyone, regardless of nobles or commoners, yearned to join. Every youngster's goal was to become a noble mage or knight. If one did not have outstanding talent in magic, picking the next choice and becoming a swordsman was also a decent choice. As the Empire's largest training institution, the yearly recruitment of Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, which is located in the Empire's capital, was always extremely lively. Most of the Empire's talents would flock to Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, hoping to be able to be a student of the academy. Generally, as long as one enters Babylon Academy of Magic and Force and successfully graduates, one would have a beautiful future regardless if they are a commoner or a noble. Of course, if the student was a child of nobility and studied magic, the student's prospects would naturally be even brighter. Students would undergo many tests and would be able to choose a major suited to their mental strength and their ability to sense the magical elements. Generally, if one was able to sense a particular element better, it would be easier for them to study in that major. Of course, this wasn't absolute. There were people who were only able to weakly sense the darkness element, but due to their interest they eventually became dark grand magi. The foundation only plays a small part, while one's final accomplishments would still be dependent on themselves. Hence, when students pass all the different tests and reach the time in choosing their major. The crux would often be their interest and the major's strength rather than the student choosing the major based on which element they could sense the strongest. All along, Babylon Academy of Magic and Force advocated and insisted all along on respecting the student's interest and choice. None of the majors had the right to force outstanding students to join their major. The final decision would be made by the student, while what each major had to do was to take advantage of their strengths in attracting excellent students to join. This was the same for the necromancy major. The necromancy major that had declined for many years had become a branch of the dark major. However, the necromancy major and dark major were after all not the same major. When it's time to recruit new students, the necromancy major also had the qualifications to recruit students independently. In an incomparably wide plaza, each magic major of Babylon Academy of Magic and Force occupied their own area, individually establishing numerous recruitment points for the light, dark, fire, water, wind, earth, lightning, summoning, space, and necromancy majors. Every major had made their recruitment point noticeable, either displaying large banners that stated their major's strengths or inviting outstanding seniors that had graduated from their major to attend and attract the crowd, or promising benefits for entering their major. Every major spared no effort in showing off their major so as to draw outstanding students to their own major. Talent was the most fundamental aspect of a student in Babylon Academy. As long as a major was able to produce an extraordinary mage, not only would it bring glory to the whole major, the major would also have an advantage in all future school activities. The stronger the major, the more funds and resources they could apply for. Taking the Earth major for example, 30 years ago the constantly declining Earth major had welcomed Scare, causing the Earth major to lead in many consecutive school competitions by a wide margin. The current Scare had become a well-known Earth sacred magus within Lancelot Empire, allowing the Earth major to rise from many years of decline to be the strongest major in the academy. There were many similar examples. The reason why the light and dark major had held the advantage for so many years was also due to the appearance of a few outstanding students in recent years. The weak and bullied necromancy major also stood out due to Hansha-O's appearance faintly showing signs of splitting from the dark major and becoming independent. In the remote northeast corner of the plaza, 5 tall skeleton warriors raised a large banner which showed the necromancy major welcomes you to join them behind a large table. The two instructors, Fanny and Jean, sat at the desk while Lisa, Amy, Athena and the other necromancy students were shouting their lungs out. Why are we allocated this area? This area clearly deviates from the core zone. Those fellows in the dark major are obviously forcing us aside. HMPH, Lisa angrily shouted, turning her head to look at the calm Fanny before asking, Master Fanny, do you think Brian will come? It has been a long time since he last came by the necromancy major. That fellow has become a celebrity in the Empire. Could it be that he has forgotten his friends here? Oh, and you as well? A long time has passed and Lisa had long since got over her previous anger toward Fanny and Hansha-O. However, only Lisa knew if she still bitterly longed for Hansha-O, and even Fanny was unable to see through her. Having experienced the tragic downfall of her family, Lisa was much stronger than Fanny could imagine. She was no longer the previously willful girl who only knew to cause trouble. Rather, she had truly calmed her mind in studying necromancy magic. Currently, Lisa had actually become a journeyman mage with Fanny's assistance. Fanny smiled as she glanced at Lisa, explaining, haven't I already asked Derek to send a letter to him? If he has received my letter and just so happened to have nothing to handle, I believe he would come. Don't be worried. Although the location of our necromancy major is slightly secluded, I still believe there will be students that come on account of its reputation. Fanny naturally wouldn't tell Lisa that when Hansha-O had returned from Bretel City, the first person he had looked for was herself. At that time, when Hansha-O told her that he had immediately headed to Babylon Academy to look for her once he entered Dawson City, Fanny was secretly delighted for quite a while. In this period of time, Hansha-O has risen rapidly within the Empire, with nobles and commoners everywhere spreading Hansha-O's impressive accomplishments. In particular, Hansha-O's achievement of killing the leader leader of Brute Merchant Alliance's Redbud Knights Celt, and his green dragon was spread widely to every corner of Lancelot Empire. Han Sha'o's rise had caused the Necromancy Major to similarly be in the spotlight. Currently within Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, none of the other majors dared to blatantly bully the Necromancy Major. Even Dean Emma was clearly citing the Necromancy Major, which made Fanny feel extremely relaxed. "Master Fanny, how many new students do you think we can recruit this year?" Jean asked Fanny, who was sitting beside him. Jean, who was originally infatuated with Fanny, had previously seen Fanny and Han Sha'o being intimate by accident. In addition, with Fanny had succeeded in becoming a necromancy archmage, his feelings had gradually faded. No matter which aspect was compared, an adept mage instructor like himself was a far cry from the rising necromancy grand magus Han Sha'o. When Fanny had also become a necromancy archmage, Jean had given up even more completely. In this way, Jean focused his energy on his career, on one hand striving hard in studying magic, on the other hand attempting to develop and promote teaching as a career. His contribution to the growth of the Necromancy Major in this period of time wasn't small. Previously, when he had returned to his hometown, Jean had mentioned that he was once the instructor of Bretel City's Count Brian, immediately causing a sensation in the small town. Jean had also benefited from Han Sha'o's status, causing Jean's resentment toward Han Sha'o to slowly dissipate. "Who knows? Perhaps there will be a few." Fanny smiled as she replied, "Excuse me, may I ask, is this the Necromancy Major? Did the Empire's Necromancy Grand Magus Count Brian graduate from this major?" A youngster that was dressed exquisitely and was followed by a steward had come over and inquired courteously. "That's right, Brian did indeed graduate from our major," Jean was delighted, hastily answering. "Ha, I finally found it. Why are you so secluded?" the youngster shouted excitedly, before animatedly saying, "My mental strength is excellent and have the strongest affinity for dark magic. However, I choose the Necromancy Major. I hope you will accept me." After finishing his sentence, the youngster shouted loudly toward a few companions that were pacing back and forth in the distance, "Friends, I've found the Necromancy Major. They are over here. You should come over." After the youngster shouted, the other teenagers all had delighted expressions, excitedly running towards Fanny's direction. The results of these students in the mental strength test were exceptional, and they were also all from noble backgrounds. They were precisely the people that instructors of every major coveted. No one expected that all of a sudden all of them would run toward the Necromancy Major. Chapter 390. Respect. Haha, welcome. Choosing the Necromancy Major is definitely the correct decision. When Jean saw these few young students making a beeline for their position, he couldn't help but chuckle as he hastily stood up, taking out a few pamphlets and passed one to each person. He smiled as he explained, "Everyone fill in your details." There aren't many rules in our Necromancy Major, and the school fees is the lowest. These youngsters that came over were clearly attracted by Han Sha'o's reputation. After hearing Jean's instructions, all of them excitedly leaned over the table to fill in their forms. There were a few youngsters that had been lingering a distance away, and they didn't seem to be from the same group. However, their goal was identical and were also searching for the Necromancy Major's location. When they heard the shouts coming from this direction, all of them had an excited look as they headed for the Necromancy Major's area. "Hey Carlisle, your mental strength is excellent and your affinity with the darkness element is extremely high. As long as you are willing to study dark magic, you will definitely become a dark grand magus. Don't leave for a student like you. Our dark major also gives many benefits." A dark magic professor hastily shouted as he looked at a youngster directly heading toward the Necromancy Major in the corner. "I'm sorry, but I was under the impression that the Dark Major and Necromancy Major were the same and hence came over here. I didn't that the Necromancy Major could actually enroll students on their own. I apologize. The reason I'm here is because I want to become a Necromancy Grand Magus like Marquis Brian, not because of the Dark Major." For this youngster to find out about Han Sha'o's title of Marquis, he definitely does not come from a simple background. He was neither haughty nor humble as he replied, performing a bow before leaving the Dark Major's recruitment point in large strides without any hesitation. The expression of Dark Major Archmage Dio, who was sitting behind the Dark Major's recruitment table, gradually became unsightly. Carlisle was a student that he fancied for a long time. From the start, when Carlisle entered Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, Dio was immediately certain that Carlisle was a good seedling in studying dark magic. So as to recruit Carlisle, Dio even sent a few teachers to separately approach him. Carlisle had also showed great passion from the start and was always extremely pleased. Who would have known that in the end Carlisle actually headed for the necromancy major without even looking back, even saying that the reason why he was amicable with them was purely because he misunderstood the relation between the dark major and the necromancy major. That was practically a slap to Dio's face. Isn't it just a petty slave achieving unexpected success? What is so amazing about that? HMPH. The dark major teacher that was rejected by Carlisle couldn't help but censure, furiously attempting to vent the resentment in his heart. Dio, isn't the necromancy major a branch of the dark major? Why does the current situation seem like the necromancy major faintly pressuring the dark major instead? I didn't expect that in the time that I left the dark major. Not only did you not progress, you actually led the dark major to such a state. A tall and lean middle-aged magus appeared next to Dio, frowning as he berated Dio, who was the dark major's person in charge. Crowley, although you have become a dark grand magus, you have always been outside the Lancelot Empire. Previously your reputation was very big, but there hasn't been any youngsters that know about you for a long time. However, this Brian has been rising rapidly these days, and within the hearts of the youngsters in the Empire only he is a true hero. Your era has passed. Dio glanced at the middle-aged magus, smiling bitterly as he replied. Crowley and Dio were both previously from Babylon Academy's Dark Major. At that time when Crowley was in the Dark Major, the competition between majors had been dominated by the Dark Major for consecutive years. He only took a very short time after he advanced to the rank of Adept Mage and graduated to advance even further to become a Dark Archmage, causing a sensation within the Lancelot Empire for many years. However, after Crowley became an Archmage, he couldn't make a breakthrough. After a while he left Lancelot Empire, traveling to many nations within the profound continent, and was finally able to become a Dark Grand Magus a few years ago. Dio and Crowley were from the same year, but Dio clearly didn't have as much talent as Crowley, only reaching the rank of Dark Archmage. Dio had heard that Crowley had returned to the Lancelot Empire and thus invited him to show his support. Unfortunately, Crowley had left the Lancelot Empire for too long that even some of the elderly had forgotten about him, not to mention the young students that adored heroes. Crowley had been standing here for quite a while, and even though Dio painstakingly introduced him, there wasn't anyone that took notice of him. Dio, that fellow Brian really became a necromancy grand magus in such a short time? A magus who studied dark magic would naturally have a sinister aura wrapping around their body. Indeed, one of the three heavyweights of Dark Mantle had this aura, and this Grand Magus named Crowley had this aura too. The somber expression he gave Dio would definitely cause an average person who saw it to be fearful. When Dio heard Crowley's question, although he was extremely unwilling to admit it, but the truth could not be changed, he could only smile bitterly and replied, "That youngster is a freak. He really became a necromancy Grand Magus that quickly." What is more frightening is that he simply didn't stay in the necromancy major for a long time, only appearing a few times at crucial moments. No one knows how he managed to train that quickly. Oh, that's indeed somewhat interesting. Unfortunately, that person isn't here, otherwise I would truly want to meet him. I have been forgotten by the people in Lancelot Empire for too long, and would indeed need to compete with an expert so that more people will know that I've returned. Crowley muttered to himself while having a pensive expression. Dio glanced at Crowley, egging him on. That's right, Crowley, currently that fellow is having rising prestige within Lancelot Empire. The fastest way for you to make a name for yourself is to defeat him. You can indeed try. That fellow had just advanced to necromancy grand magus, and I feel he is surely not your match. As Dio and Crowley were previously in the same year, Dio was extremely clear about Crowley's character. Dio could tell just by looking at Crowley's expression what he was thinking about, and couldn't help but egg him on. In the years when Crowley was still in the Dark Major, he was famous for being proud and arrogant. Dio could see that Crowley's temperament had not changed even after so many years. Unfortunately, that fellow isn't here today. otherwise I could seize the opportunity to stop his rise. Dio's suggestion matched Crowley's intentions. He was absolutely confident in his own strength and couldn't help but become restless. While they were discussing at the dark major, other teachers in the rest of the majors were also silently cursing. This was especially so at the light major. At this moment the person in charge of the light major, Archmage Voigtlander, was similarly having a deflated expression as he shouted furiously, "What is going on?" Liliac had such a strong affinity with the light element but actually headed to the enemy necromancy major. Doesn't she know that with her circumstances studying light magic would have the best prospects? How can those dark creatures of the necromancy major be able to match light magic? This is simply preposterous. Seated behind the light major's area was someone Han Sha-O was familiar with. One of Dark Mandel's three heavyweights, Light Grand Magus Amiz. Currently Amiz was enjoying a pot of good tea, sitting leisurely and smiling as he looked at Voigtlander, not sharing any opinions. The Swordmaster stood behind Amiz, dedicated to Amiz's protection. They also didn't care about Voigtlander's words. In their eyes Amiz's safety was the most important. Voigtlander indignantly complained and then faced the invited Amiz and said, "Lord Amiz, do you think this matter is absurd? The necromancy major is such a small major, yet they actually became so lucky because of a small servant even snatching away our light major students." Amiz had previously graduated from the light major, eventually becoming a chancellor of authority within the Lancelot Empire. In the eyes of Lancelot Empire's nobles, Amiz was a terrifying demon. Once Amiz has fixed his attention on a certain noble family, that noble family will definitely meet with misfortune. However, although Amiz didn't have a favorable impression of Voigtlander, who was 2 ranks below himself, he still had some feelings for the light major. Hence when he received Voigtlander's invitation, Amiz agreed to attend. At present, as he heard Voigtlander's complaints, Amiz only smiled faintly and replied gracefully, "Brian is a Marquis of the Empire and is regarded highly by His Majesty. It is best that you are careful with what you say." For Voigtlander, who didn't know that Han Sha-O was a member of Dark Mantle, to blindly ridicule Han Sha-O in front of Amiz, he would definitely not get any benefits. When Voigtlander heard Amiz's reply, he was astonished as he looked at Amiz, not understanding why Amiz was speaking on behalf of Han Sha-O. "Haha, you should just carry on with your own matters. Those students that enter the necromancy major have all done so out of blind adoration of a hero. After some time, when they realize they are not suited to studying necromancy magic, I believe they will still recognize the facts and return to the light major. There's no need for you to worry." As a high-ranking member of Dark Mantle, Amiz could see the main issue in a glance and couldn't help but console Voigtlander. I just can't swallow my anger." Voigtlander pondered for a moment and understood that what Amiz said was reasonable. However, he still couldn't help but shout angrily. Amiz hiddenly looked at Voigtlander in disdain, thinking in his heart that the current Brian is simply not someone a teacher of the light major can contend against. Pondering for a while, as well as taking to account his feelings for the light major, Amiz reminded Voigtlander, "I'll say one thing, this Brian isn't someone you can provoke. Even if you can't swallow your anger, you should forcefully contain it. If not, it would lead to your own demise." Amiz controlled a division of Dark Mantle and had a close relationship with His Majesty. From the series of arrangements His Majesty had made today, he could already spot some clues and understood that prior to His Majesty's passing, no one within Lancelot Empire would be able to act against Han Sha-O. Even he himself would not be able to, much less a light major's teacher. This Lord Amiz, where do these words stem from? Voigtlander was startled, somewhat baffled, as he inquired. "Go comprehend it yourself." "Ha ha, the reason why I've said this to you is on the account of you inviting me. Look at those fellows in the Dark Major. I can guarantee that they would pay bitterly sooner or later." "Oh, it's not sooner or later, maybe they would pay bitterly very soon." "Ha, that fellow actually came. Didn't he just depart from His Majesty's place not long ago?" Amiz first warned Voigtlander before suddenly spotting a tall and imposing figure in the distance. He couldn't help but exclaiming softly. Following Amiz's line of sight, Voigtlander also saw the approaching Han Sha-O. He couldn't help but cry in alarm, "Good gracious, how has that fellow become so tall?" The previous time Voigtlander saw Han Sha-O, he wasn't even 180 meters. Han Shao had immediately looked for Fanny every time he went to the Necromancy Major, and normal people would simply not have the chance to see Han Shao. The figure of Han Shao, who trained in demonic magic, was currently as imposing as a demonic god, nationally exuding devilishly attractive traits. Even though he was within a sea of people, Han Shao's tall and imposing body and traits would still draw in everyone's gaze, causing everyone to focus their attention on him, inevitably becoming everyone's focal point. "Master Fanny, it's Brian!" Brian's here, he really came. Lisa was originally glancing around senselessly, not expecting Han Shao to really return. When she saw Han Shao's prominent figure in the corner of her eye, her heart was in upheaval and she was unable to resist crying out in surprise. "It seems that only when I truly see him that I realize that all these days of trying to forget him has been useless. I'm still unable to forget him." After crying out in surprise, Lisa's expression suddenly dulled as she sighed inwardly. When she heard Lisa's cry, Fanny's eyes gave off a joyous radiance of disbelief. She was somewhat unable to resist immediately standing up, but remembered that there were many people around. She couldn't help but blush as she sat back down, scolding herself inwardly for losing control. She imitated the action of taking a sip of water, controlling her tone as much as possible as she said to the group of excited youngsters, "That person is Brian. He can be considered as your senior." These new necromancy students that rushed over due to Han Shao's reputation had just completed the procedures to enter the necromancy major. When they heard Fanny's sentence, they couldn't help but blush, all of them standing on tiptoe to do their utmost and seeing a little further, searching for any trace of their hero. In that moment their young and tender hearts were filled with emotions and excitement. As Han Shao continued walking, he realized that due to his appearance numerous gazes were uniformly converging on him. When Han Shao looked around and did not immediately see the necromancy major's recruitment point, he couldn't help but become suspicious. However, Han Shao understood that the Necromancy Major was a branch of the Dark Major, and the Dark Major's location was actually extremely conspicuous. Only after a mystical demon floated upward to overlook the area did he spot Fanny in a corner behind the Dark Major. When Han Shao saw the words on the banner being held up by 5 skeleton warriors, he couldn't help but laugh and think inwardly, as a Lancelot Empire's largest magic academy, why does the recruitment seem like a food market? Han Shao continued walking toward the Necromancy Major as he pondered. Just as Han Shao was about to reach the Necromancy Major's recruitment point, Dio hastily pulled Crowley, saying in a low voice, "That fellow is Brian. If you intend to seize the chance to become famous, defeating him is a good idea." Crowley followed Dio's gaze, couldn't help but blew a raspberry. "Dio, did you make a mistake? Is that fellow really a necromancer? Why does he look like he's more well built than barbarian warriors?" Dio was somewhat speechless, having an ugly expression as he explained, "That's right, it's him. Merely it is said that he also practices a mysterious martial technique and had previously defeated Brute Merchants Alliance's Liocane." "Crowley, could it be that you were afraid? Also practices a martial technique?" Crowley stared blankly before smiling confidently as he replied, "A magus that isn't focused on one thing is the easiest to deal with. If you didn't mention this point, I would still be somewhat apprehensive. Since that is the case, I feel reassured." As Han Shao headed for the Necromancy Major, he was slightly surprised at the amount of attention he was getting. He didn't think that his appearance would actually cause so many people to be flustered. The Light Major's recruitment point was also at a very eye-catching location. Han Shao had noticed a mist through a mystical demon, and when he passed by the Light Major's recruitment point, he couldn't help but nodding his head to send his greetings to Amiz, who was leisurely sipping tea. As Amiz was one of the 3 heavyweights of Dark Mando, he could also be considered Han Shao's immediate superior. Furthermore, Amiz was Emily's brother. No matter publicly or privately, Han Shao had to show respect when he saw Amiz. When Amiz, who was originally sitting there leisurely sipping tea, saw Han Shao's greeting, he didn't dare be disrespectful and actually stood up and smiled as he returned the greeting. For someone like Amiz to be so respectful to an upstart like Han Shao, Voigtlander was slightly surprised. As he recalled what Amiz had advised him, Voigtlander suddenly understood and instead viewed the Dark Major and Schadenfreude. Seeing Crowley's restless appearance, it seemed like a show was about to begin. Seeing Amiz stand up to return the greeting, Han Shao was similarly astonished. No matter how he saw it with Amiz's status, even returning the greeting smiling while seated was already showing face to Han Shao. He truly didn't think that Amiz would actually stand and show his respect. This signified that Amiz treated Han Shao as someone on the same level and simply not treating Han Shao as a subordinate. Otherwise, regardless of his age or qualifications within Dark Mantle, there was simply no need for Amiz to stand and return the greeting. Showing a splendid smile, Han Shao, who was slightly confused, directly headed for the necromancy major, not thinking deeply about the reason behind Amiz's friendliness. Suddenly a malicious-looking middle-aged magus stood in Han Shao's way. Crowley hiddenly measured up Han Shao, suddenly saying, "Are you Count Brian?" "Ha ha, let me introduce myself. I am Crowley and have graduated from Babylon Academy's Dark Major. I have always been fascinated by the exploration of magic and have recently just returned to Lancelot Empire." "Get to the point." Han Shao knitted his brows, interrupting before Crowley could complete her sentence. Crowley had an embarrassed expression, not expecting that with Han Shao's position as a noble count he actually rudely interrupted his speech. That caused Crowley to be dazed for a moment. "I heard that Count Brian is a necromancy Grand Magus. May I know if Lord Count would give me the honor of comparing notes with me?" After Crowley was interrupted by Han Shao, he was a little annoyed, getting right to the point and issuing his challenge. When they heard this sentence, the students and teachers in the Dark Major were shocked. The attention of the nearby majors were all focused here and had also heard Crowley's loud challenge. They all became excited in an instant, hastily abandoning their current tasks and rushed over. Over at the necromancy major, Fanny had continuously gazed at Han Shao once he appeared and had clearly heard the challenge by Dark Major's Crowley. Before Fanny could express anything, Lisa and the other students had already headed over. Fanny hesitated a moment, turning around and said to Jean, "Master Jean, sorry to trouble you to look after this place. I'll head over to take a look." "Sure, go ahead. I will look after this area." Jean knew the real relationship between Fanny and Han Shao, nodding understandingly as he replied, "Let's go over and take a look too." "Ha ha, where did this fellow come from to go as far as to challenge our hero?" All the new necromancy students that had joined because of Han Shao's reputation excitedly ran over. Amiz, who had just sat down, suddenly spurted out a mouth of tea, awkwardly looking at Voigtlander, who was on the receiving end. He embarrassingly smiled before saying, "I'm really sorry. That fellow really did as I predicted, wanting to seize the opportunity to make a name for himself." "Ha ha, it's nothing, my lord is indeed formidable." As Voigtlander used a napkin to wipe away the tea on his body, he smiled and complimented Amiz. He wouldn't dare blame Amiz.